Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our live stream today, which is focusing on Capture One Mobile. So we had a new release last week, Mobile 2.7, which included some updates to the UI on how layers and masks work. So we have a look at that, and also included some new features around assisted masking, so subject and background masking, and also the ability to tap to select and also draw to select as well. So if you're watching in our live streaming room, of course, you can always ask a question as normal. And the way to do that is just to go into the Q&A tab. You can see at the top of the chat, and then myself, Helen or Victor, who are also here as well, will be able to get back to you. If you want to hide that, you can do so just by tapping the little downward arrow, and that will give you more space. Hello to those of you on YouTube as well. Of course, you can also ask a question and we'll be able to see that too. Okay, now with the whole iPad side of things, it's slightly, but not by much, slightly more complicated to share. So we can either have an overhead camera, or that's a good start. Let's just get that iPadding, which has decided now not to show up, of course. Let's turn it off and on again, is normally the way forward. But for the most part, we can survive, there we go, with the overhead camera, and that's how we're going to start. So today's about layers and masks, and also, as I said, a couple of changes to the interface. We'll also talk about using this guy, the Apple Pencil, which can be a lot more useful when you are doing hand-drawn masks. But hopefully with the advent of assisted masking, then it's going to be a little bit easier. So UI change wise, you've still got your layers palette up here in the top right hand corner. But the way you do a couple of the masks takes you into an edit mode, which just makes it a lot easier to use. First of all, let's have a look at subject and background masking. So if we tap the plus up here in the top right hand corner, this is where you're going to see your options for masking, including the good old traditional brush at the bottom, and then all the other options that we've got here as well. So first of all, if we look at subject and background, you can probably imagine what happens. We tap that, it will say preparing subject mask, and then we can see our subject mask like so. If you're using desktop, pretty much the same principle. So no input required from yourself on what and where the subject is. Capture One will just use the algorithms to figure that out. Same goes for background. If we do that and say select background mask, then it's going to pick that up. That happened a little bit faster because we'd already had our subject mask calculated, so there was some information that we can already use to calculate that a little bit quicker. Again, that's exactly the same on the desktop as well. So we've got those two, very simple to use. A little tip which we forgot to mention this morning is that as these masks are dynamic, they can also be used in a copy-paste workflow. So if we go and choose our gentleman here, and let's just do a select subject as an example. So that's going to prepare our subject mask like so. And then if I go ahead and say down here, copy, so copy adjustments, so adjustments copied, and go into select mode, and let's just select these three pictures. We don't have to select that one. So those three images, and then say paste. Then you'll see up here the progress wheel, because it will have to do the calculations for each one. So once that has finished, you can see this pop up. And then now if I cancel out of select mode, and then we look at this image, and down here we can see we've got our subject mask like so. Same for this guy. We've also got our subject mask. So copy paste works quite nicely as well. Keith was just asking, is there a minimum requirement for iPad? Gen 2 iPad Pro 12.9. That's absolutely fine. This is good question. It's not a Gen 1. I think it's the same as yours, Keith, and works absolutely fine. Obviously, if you've got M4 equipped iPad Pro, it's going to run, a bit snappier, but this is all running on an M1. So, any of you who've got better equipment than that is going to, experience better performance after all. Okay, so subject and background. Don't forget copy paste. Of course, that will apply in a workflow. If you want to shoot tethered as well, if you've got the next capture adjustments icon switched on, so when you're tethering, there's a little icon down at the bottom here where you can copy over next adjustments. That's also going to work as well. Okay, let's go to the next thing, which is going to be tap to select. Let's hide that. Paula says, will Capture on Mobile add features for the squeeze function? Well, I don't know what the squeeze function is. You're a step ahead of me there, Paula. But if you have a good idea, then you can also put it on our ideas site as well. So if you go to our support site, then you'll be able to plug in your ideas. But yeah, if you can elaborate what squeeze does, then maybe I can give a more intelligent answer. Just checking another question here. Is an internet, oh, that's a good question from Torsten. Is an internet connection required to mask the subject? No. So all the AI, so what you just saw with subject and background masking and what you're going to see now with the tap to select does not require an internet connection. I'm connected to the internet just by default, but you don't have to be for that. So tap to select. So this is where the interface changes a little bit, not in a bad way, but in a good way. So if we go plus again and we do tap to select, first of all, then we go into a slightly different mode called edit mode. So you'll see a couple of icons up here at the top and a few down the left-hand side. So these relate to the mode that we're in. So we're in tap to select. These two relate to whether we're adding or subtracting, or brushing or erasing, however you want to think of it. And this one here shows us mask visibility. So if I wanted to tap to select, I just move this little pointer to what I want to select, and pretty much then you'll get a preview of what's going to be selected. So once I'm happy with that, I can tap once more, like so, and now I've got the mask. Now if I want to continue adding to that, I can do so. So if I drag it down here, and tap the little tick, then we add that to the mask. Now don't worry, if you want to select something kind of off the edge of the frame, you can also tap in the middle and that will also make a selection. So it doesn't have to be tap the blue tick, you can just tap once again in the middle if you wish. So now I've got my selections. When you're happy with what you've done, you just need to press done and you can see that our mask is created like so. So now if I hide the mask, which is done via this one, and let's just pick anything. So if I want to darken those down a bit, you can see it's now affecting just that area. Let's go for saturation as well. So super simple, a lot easier selecting that than obviously having to brush it by hand. Doesn't mean that we can't have hand draw masks, and I'll show you an example where that makes sense as well. So that's tap to select. Now let's make another layer and we're going to choose draw to select. So if you're used to Capture One on the desktop, very similar principle to the AI brush, except the AI brush on desktop is combined. You're either drawing a box or you're tapping. So this is a separate tool. So if I start to draw kind of inside the handbag kind of thing, then I can go ahead, if I turn the mask on and mask different things, I can keep drawing little boxes around to pick up the stuff that I want. So I'm not restricted to just one selection, if you like. So I can fill in, as much of the bits and pieces that I want. So similar way, and now you can see the mask. If I tap done, hiding our mask is done with this toggle switch here as well. And if I go to my shadows as an example, then I can open up the shadows just in that area like so. So tap to select for individual items. You can keep combining that. Draw to select in a similar way. Now, if I was to want to edit something, I can go back in and just say edit, and that will take me back into edit mode. I can use any of the tools that I wish. So if I turn my mask on, let's say we wanted to erase a little bit, I could take out the erase one. Let's say I wanted to get rid of that bit of the mask in the corner, or I wanted to get rid of that bit down there. then I can do so. Again, once you're happy, tap done, and then you're back into the image. So you can go back and forth as many times as you like, adding to the mask, subtracting to the mask, and so forth. Very straightforward. Just checking in questions. I think we are good. They've all been answered. Nice, great. So that's tap to select and draw to select. Now you can combine these masks in various different ways. So in a second, let's go to a different image and we talk about traditional brushing for a second and combining that with other masks as well. So Ken question there. Can the pointer size resize into a smaller one? So no, you can't resize that one, but I've found it doesn't really need it. When you're kind of moving it around, then it's picking out the elements quite nicely. I'd say if it's selecting too much, that would then be a good candidate to use the draw to select, because then you can draw, you know, much smaller boundary and so on. All right, this one. So brushing, pretty straightforward. Again, the UI is slightly different to how it was in the former version. I think it's improved by quite a big amount. I found it a bit clunky to brush on how it was before. Now it actually works much nicer. So if I go into brush, so that takes us into edit mode again. Now we've got our brush parameters on the left-hand side, sorry. When I say adjust the size, for example, then you can see a preview of what the brush dynamics are doing. 2 circles, so in the center circle, that's where the opacity is at its maximum. By the time it's reached the outer circle, that's where the opacity is faded to 0. So I'm going to go for something like that, and then plus for brushing. So as I start brushing, mask is visible. So then you're going to see the mask appear like so. So if I wanted to brush on the walkway, I can do. If, oops, I make a mistake, I can grab minus like so. Not sure how big. Let's make that a bit bigger. And then I can take out any little mistakes that I've done as well. Now there's nothing to stop you, as I said, combining different types of masks together. So if I wanted to add this, buildings in the Merc, to this, I could go for my draw to select and then draw a boundary around it and then let Capture One mask that one, except I was on minus, so that wouldn't work. So let's do that again. Draw a boundary around that. If I just want to fill that little sneaky bit in there, I can do so. So brush mask combined with a AI mask, super easy. There's also a little tiny bit there as well, so we could add that in. Once again, when I say done, I'm back out, and then now if I hide my mask, go and find some additional clarity to boost that up a bit, I can do so. So there's no reason why you're restricted to a mask type per layer. Available once again, if we go back into edit mode, you can mix and match all those different types as you wish, adding and subtracting as you wish as well. Easy. Okay, question wise, oh, I just missed one. Is the quantity of layers set to 16? Yeah, so same again as desktop. If you're running that, 16 layers is a maximum that you can have here as well. Gradients. So let's go and find a different shot for a second. Linear and radial gradients work in a pretty simple way as well. So if I go in and make myself a new linear gradient, this takes us onto the edit mode once more. Shows me the linear icon here. You can't mix and match these kinds of masks with linear or radial, so that's why you haven't seen this icon before. So if I go ahead and do this, so I can rotate from the center line, I can move this up and down, and this controls my fall off, like so. So now if I say done, just hide that mask, and let's say if we wanted to make that horizon darker, then we can do so. So if I go back into edit mode, just want to test something out. If I grab the brush and then want to start adding brush mask 2 here, you'll get this pop-up message that says, do you want to rasterize the mask? Because this was a linear gradient, which I can go back in and adjust. If I want to add a brush to it, let's say I wanted to add a little tweak to the bottom or something like that, then it would have to lock that gradient, linear gradient in place, which is fine, but it means you wouldn't be able to retrospectively change it. So if I say cancel and pick up this, I can go in and tweak my linear gradient, as you can see, at any point. As soon as I want to add something else on, it's going to ask me if I want to rasterize. So just be aware of that. So that's our linear gradients, and of course we can combine as many adjustments as we wish, like so. Similar deal for the radial gradient. So if I say plus, add radial, we're going to get our circle shapes here. Sorry if that's not super clear, that maybe makes it a little bit clearer. So we've got those 3 lines. If we grab the outer dotted one, we can change the fall off. We can turn the mask back on there. Center one we can grab to rotate, like so, and then we can pull this to change our fall off. So again, once I'm happy with our mask, oh, by the way, if you wanted to invert that, you can pull that just in the side, inside, like so. So once more, say done, turn off my mask. If I would like to make a bit of a vignette, I would always suggest you use brightness. Reason for that being is that when we're playing with brightness, it's a bit more sympathetic to the shadows. If we add exposure and pull that down, it gets kind of a very obvious and ugly vignette if you're not careful. So brightness for vignette works much better. Again, if we want to go back in and tweak that radial, back into edit mode, away you go, make your changes. You can see the adjustments following the radial. So you've got that interactive view, so you know exactly how it's going to look. Question from Paul, it'd be nice to have the invert mask icon on the masking edit screen and not the layer screen. Yeah, that could be nice. I'm sure there's scope for sort of adding additional ones up there as well. Is this available on Android? Adrian is asking. No, Adrian, it's currently only on iOS, so that would be iPads and iPhones. The reason for that is that a large chunk of the code that we use on the desktop, we can move over to iOS because there's some commonality. Unfortunately, with Android, we would have to rewrite everything from the ground up. Now, that's not to say that's never going to happen, but right now, in terms of bandwidth and being able to service the application on mobile, then for now, it's just restricted to iOS. Josephine and Paula are asking, can we use Luma Range on Capture One for iPad? No, not currently. Again, if you think that's a nice idea, then you can add that to our ideas board as well. Right, Paul says, great, that invert action. Yeah, so you can invert your radial right there, but I agree, it might be nice to have some, other functionality up there as well. Okay, question from Antonia, can you mask something first and then add a gradient mask without rasterizing? No, you can't. So you'd have to add your gradient, and if you wanted to tweak it, add some other mask, then you would have to do that originally. Okay. Just checking a question. Okay. If you export your pictures to desktop, will these layers follow to the computer? I'm going to divert to my colleagues there who will do a quick search because I know there is some restrictions, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. So Helen and Victor, if you can remember, I can't quite off the top of my head, but I had a feeling there was some restriction. So if you do EIP export, so if you export originals, so if we do export, and do EIP, then that will package everything up. If you're going through the cloud, then you potentially lose those layers. So what I tend to do is if I package as EIP and say export, then you get some sharing options. And then if you're literally right next to your desktop, you can airdrop it, or you can save it to your file system. So if you've got iCloud Drive, you could save to that. If you've got Dropbox, you could save to that as well. So 3 options kind of, you can instantaneously get that over to your desktop. AirDrop if you're right next to it, those other options if you're, on the way home or whatever. So using cloud transfer, you're going to blank out your layers. So use that EIP option. Okay, where was I? Using a brush, we've done that. Okay, by the way, I didn't say at the start this would be a shorter live stream, but it's going to be because it's easier to knock off all these things quite quickly, and it's also like nice and simple to use. Adjustment layers. So this is one which I almost missed it at the top of the list. So an adjustment layer. So what does that do? That gives you a completely filled adjustment layer, which is really nice because it allows you to potentially split up your adjustments into different layers. So if you wanted to do color adjustments on one layer, contrast adjustments on a different layer, then it brings opacity into play as well. So if on this layer, let's just pull our highlights down a touch, sorry, wrong way. Let's pull our highlights down a touch. There's a little bit of color grading on here. So let's go and bump up our saturation a bit. But if you want to take down the opacity, you can do so on that particular layer. So you can tweak, multiple adjustments on one layer at once with the opacity control, which is really handy. This filled layer, you can of course edit that like any other layer. So if we go into the edit option like so, let's grab, say, the draw to select, do a little quick analysis, and then if I did minus, I could take him out of the layer. So then I've only got my adjustments on that particular layer. So working with layers with different sets of adjustments can be quite a nice flexible way to work. Very typical if we're doing it on desktop as well, but now it's just as easy to do it on mobile as well. So if you've missed that option or didn't quite understand what it meant, that gives you a filled layer which you can then apply your adjustments to. Okay, other layer controls that we've got down here on the right hand side under the 3 dots, edit, invert, duplicate and invert, duplicate layer, rename layer. So rename layer, obviously it is handy to do so because it can avoid confusion, certainly if you've got lots of layers and you're not sure what each one is. So I can say that's an adjustment layer like so, minus man, if we're being very specific, like so. So I know exactly what it's doing. These are also super handy, the invert mask and also duplicate and invert. So if you want the opposite of the mask, then it's actually really quick just to tap that, and now I've got my inverse. So if you'll see here on my exposure, now we've got that center vignette instead. So duplicate and invert, really super handy. And then we've also got just invert. So if I inverted that one, then I'll be back to what I was before on the other layer. If you want to kill it, then you can click on that again and just say remove layer, and that takes it away. But those additional features actually really super handy. Okay, let's see. If I start out fully zoomed out with a picture, either full image, and I start using AI masking, can I use the spread fingers gesture to zoom in? Yeah, that's a good question actually, Al. So I found this, so let's go to, shall we just grab a different image for a second? Yeah, so let's go and grab this one. So if I said tap to select or draw to select, so if I go into tap to select and I'm down here or something like that, then I can tap. So it's masked that. Let's turn the mask on. Now if I wanted to kind of look at something in a bit more detail, I can pinch zoom like so. And then now I can move it around. I can tap once more, and now I've added that to the mask. Pinch to go back out, pinch, and I can do so. So remember that your tap is the part that activates the mask. So if I wanted to zoom in over here, move this guy across, notice it was a bit quick, but it said preparing AI mask. So when you zoom in, it's doing like a higher resolution of image analysis. So if you're doing something like fine, like the hair or something like that, then you're potentially going to get a better quality mask because it's done higher resolution analysis. So let's just cancel out of that a sec. So if I go into this one, let's do a tap to select. So yeah, if we were fully zoomed out, if I go on the arm here as an example, tap to select. Now if I zoomed over here, then I could move that across, preparing AI mask, and now we've got that, tap to select, and so forth. So yeah, you can zoom in and out like that. I would personally like a way to pan around as well. And we thought about some few different options, but right now, then yeah, use those actions. Sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. Can we change the color of the mask? Keith was asking. You know what? I don't think you can. I had a quick look for it earlier. So unless I was completely blind, histogram, viewer frame, highlights, shadows, preferences. No, there isn't a way to do it. So it's currently the default red. But I agree. Sometimes I prefer like a nuclear green looking color. I find it a bit easier to see something. But no, it's not there at the moment. But again, add it to our board if you think that's useful. Okay, I think that pretty much covers it. So just to give you a little bit of a summary, remember if you are, let's remove that layer. If you are subject and background masking, it will happen instantly, so it won't take you into that edit mode. If you are adding a new layer, which is tap, draw, or the gradients, or the brush, then it will take you into edit mode. So tap, you can move that guy around, tap once to mask once more. Remember, you can mix and match your mask. So if I take a brush and then start brushing here, I've now combined that mask with that mask. Opacity on each layer to vary the strength, if you remember. If you've done let's just get rid of that lovely layer for a second. If you've added a radial or a linear gradient, as an example, or a radial or linear gradient, and then we just do a quick adjustment, you can always go back in and edit once more and adjust that and move it around. Remember, if you want to combine a radial with a radial with a brush or anything else, if you start brushing, you're going to get that rasterized message so that it locks that mask you've drawn in place. You then just have to appreciate you can't go back in and adjust it if you want to. Don't forget your additional options down here: invert, duplicate, and invert, duplicate, rename. I think, Paul, you were just asking about that. And of course, the all-important delete layer as well, which takes it away. And hiding the layers palette is just a tap, and you know how many layers you've got because you've got a little number at the top. So if I add a select subject, now you see we've got 2 layers up there as well. Copy pasting those subject and backgrounds will dynamically recalculate for other images. Same goes if you're shooting tethered as well. Might slow your tethering down a little bit, but if you are, on a nice M4 iPad, it will be pretty speedy as well. Question from Keith: is there a way to move images from desktop to mobile so you can edit on the iPad while on the road? Not really, to be honest. What we were thinking about last year and continue to investigate is the way to have a session from the desktop on an external drive and have the freedom to move that from iPad to desktop and so on. That's a little bit more complicated than first thought. Not impossible, but there's just a few things to work around. So hopefully that would be your favored way to do it, Keith, just with an external hard drive going back and forth. Nice one. Going to check for our last questions. Mark says, I've not used Capture on Mobile yet. No problem. How do you undo an action, and where do you find the layers and masks and other work panels? So undoing an action is up here. So if I tap once, that will undo. If I long press, you've got undo, redo, and reset, like so. Or long tap, not a press. My mistake. Yeah, so if I make a mistake like that, tap once to undo it, and then long tap to reset to default adjustments. All your other editing adjustments are over here on the left-hand side. So we've got styles, ratings, shape-based tools like keystone and rotation. There's also now an auto keystone and rotate over here. Don't really have a keystone-y kind of building to do, but if I say auto, then it will auto adjust to keystone and rotation. Keystone, we can auto adjust that as well. So you've got your manual tools to adjust keystoning, but auto will also do that based on examining the picture as well. So yeah, all your different adjustments down there. You can select a bunch of pictures just by tapping for like batch, copy and apply. Cancel out of that. And you've got your copy and apply buttons down here at the bottom, which you saw earlier, star ratings and color tags when you're in this mode over here. And then your general editing is over here. So exposure, white balance, curves, clarity, and so on. It's pretty easy to move around it, so just have a little explore. Importing, so if I go back, this is where we do all our importing and file management in the library. So you can import from photos on the iPad itself, or from files, or by plugging in. If you've got a card reader, like so, you can just plug that directly in and then read off your memory card as well. So lots of different ways to do it. At some point in the future, we'd do a recap of all the different iPad tools, but it's actually super simple. Everything is there. Just have a little explore around and you should be able to find it. Fantastic. All right, that is Layers and Masks on Capture One Mobile. Super simple, but enhancing it in a far better way than it was before. It was, kind of restricted just having brushes. And as I said, I wasn't super keen on the interface. This makes it much, much easier. Don't forget, coming up, I'm going to add a couple of live streams in February. They're not there yet, but you can either scan that QR code and that will take you to the live streams page. And if you hit that follow button on the top right hand corner, every time I add a new live stream article, that's going to pop up on your email so you know something is coming. Or you can go to that URL and that will take you there as well. A question from Paula just before we finish, which was, so mobile uses a catalog internally. It does, yeah. There is some hacky ways to kind of move it around, but I honestly wouldn't recommend it for the integrity of your iPad and images and the integrity of your desktop. So yeah, please wait till we do something official. Fantastic. That's it. Great. Answered all your questions. Thanks to Helen and Victor as well for answering in the background too. So if you don't see these features, make sure you can just go to the App Store, check for the latest one. You're looking for 2.7, which was 6 or 7 days now, I believe. So mobile 2.7, that's our latest version. Great. Thanks for joining me today. Enjoy your weekend when it comes and hope to see you soon. Take care.